All right, hi class. Today we are talking about symmetry and body organization. We're going to see a lot of different overviews of different types of both of these things. And then every time we talk about a different phylum in here, a different group of animals, we'll talk about that group of animals' symmetry and what kind of body organization they have. So today's kind of, I feel like it's a lot that's going to be thrown at you. It's a little complicated, but don't worry. We'll kind of break it down throughout the rest of the semester and you'll get used to this. These different terms. So let's dive in. You might remember symmetry from math class. Symmetry is about how the parts of an animal are arranged around a point or an axis. And we'll talk about three different kinds in here: asymmetry, radial symmetry, and bilateral symmetry. So the first one, asymmetry, when you see the letter A in front of a word, that means not. So this is actually not a kind of symmetry. There's only one kind of animal that doesn't have any symmetry, and that's going to be the sponges. And we'll talk about those soon. But asymmetry in general is the absence of a central point or axis around which body parts are equally distributed. So there's no set sort of pattern of their body parts. It just seems kind of random. So for your for your notes today, draw a picture. Your picture might be a sponge, so it might look something like this. Sometimes people draw SpongeBob just to remember that sponges are the one animal that doesn't actually have any symmetry. All right, the next type is called radial symmetry, and that's the arrangement of body parts around a central axis. So I often think of this as being like circular symmetry. Like if you imagine a circle or a piece of pizza, it doesn't matter like where you cut that pizza down the middle, it's going to be two half circles on each side. So it can kind of go anywhere down the middle of this organism, right, left to right, or kind of up and down or at an angle. And you're always going to get two half circles, like two half sides that look the same. So a central axis, think of circular animals for radial symmetry. There's two special kinds of radial symmetry. One that we'll see very infrequently is biradial. So biradial means you have that radial symmetry, you have a circular body plan, but the bi part means there's two extra structures that kind of look the same on the left and the right. So these kind of end up having a left and a right, even though overall they're circular structures. I'll show you a couple of pictures on the next slide. The next one is pentaradial. Penta means five. So again, they kind of are that radial. They have like a circular body plan, but they have structures arranged in five. A great example of this is going to be a sea star. So if we look at the next page, some examples of pentaradial symmetry, this might be a good one to draw for your example, is a sea star, of course. And then just for your knowledge, just because people have asked before, here's a couple examples of a biradial organism, right? They kind of have that circular shape with a paired structure, right? Even down here, you can see they kind of are paired left and right, even though if we turn them around, we could kind of see they have a circular body plan overall. So radial, for a picture, you can draw a circle, like a sea urchin, or a jellyfish or something, or just like a star, a sea star. All right, the next kind of symmetry we're going to look at is a bilateral symmetry, and this is like us, right? This is like humans or dogs or elephants. If you slice, a cut down the middle from top to bottom, you're going to divide it into a right half and a left half, and they're going to be mirror images. So it can slice, in your mind, right? A human like right down the middle has a left and a right that are generally mirror images, right? Not necessarily perfect mirror images. Something special that we see with bilaterally symmetrical organism is this thing called cephalization. So cephalos is a Greek word that means head. So they have a head. So some organisms we talk about will not have a head, like a jellyfish. But things that are bilaterally symmetrical have a head. So they have a head at the front end of their body, like a worm or like a dog or like we have, like a fish. So bilateral symmetry and cephalization go hand in hand. All right, on the back side of your notes, there's some sort of fish or a shark. And you're going to see these body direction terms a lot in this class. You don't have to have them memorized, but we're going to write them down here. So the front of an organism is called the anterior direction. So the anterior part of a shark is going to be its head. It's going to be the direction that it moves. So anterior is the front. And then opposite of that is the posterior end of an organism, this tail end, or it's the back, right? Opposite the direction of motion. And then some other words that you're going to see: dorsal and ventral. Dorsal's like the backside, not the like posterior is like behind them. Dorsal's like the backside, like the actual physical back. So sharks have this dorsal fin, right, that sticks out of the water, dorsal. And then ventral means tummy side or belly. And we'll see all those words throughout the semester. You don't have to have them memorized today. All right, so symmetry, I guess this probably should have been above. In general, right, things are asymmetrical like sponges, radial symmetry like round organisms, or bilateral symmetry when they have a definite left and a right. All right, the next part gets a little complicated. So just fill in here what is in the red words on your note sheet. So we're going to see generally two types of organization for body structure. And this has to do with, all these words are so crazy. Embryonic here, right? When they're an embryo. So like before these organisms are even born, they start as just like a ball of tissue. And they're going to start as a ball of cells that are either two-layered, right? Di or diplo means two, or three-layered, tri or triplo means three. So the first one we'll look at is diploblastic. These have two embryonic tissue layers. That means when they're embryos, they're just two layers of cells. And those two layers are going to be what's called the ectoderm and the endoderm. So we'll talk a little bit about what those are on the next slide. Triploblastic organisms have three layers. So they have the two that I already mentioned and a different one in the middle. So when we talk about embryonic layers, or sometimes they're called germ layers, this is like well before they're born, how many cells do they come from? So in general, when we talk about diploblastic organisms, they have two layers of cells before they're fully grown. The ectoderm, ecto means outside or outer, and this gives rise to the outer layer of the body, like our skin. So ecto means outer, endo means inner, and that's going to make things that are like deep inside our bodies. So the digestive system, muscles, those are going to be coming from the endoderm. You're going to see this, right? There's a third layer in triploblastic organisms. These guys don't have it, right? They just have these two layers, and they don't have like a cell layer in between those two layers. They just kind of have this like protein layer, kind of like a gel-like layer. It's a space called the mesoglia. So we'll see that word. I don't think you need to write it in your notes today, but we'll see that word in probably a week or so in jellyfish. It's kind of like the jelly layer of the jellyfish. All right, so diploblastics have the outer layer, the ectoderm, the endoderm, the inner layer. But then if you look at triploblastic organisms, they have both of those, the ectoderm and the endoderm, but they also have this third layer called the mesoderm. So meso means middle, and that's going to give rise to all sorts of organs in the body. So things like reproductive, circulatory system. So some of the more like complicated stuff that really simple organisms don't have comes from the mesoderm. All right, so we're going to look more closely at different ways that triploblastic organisms, what their body plan looks like. And there's three different versions. So we're going to look at how those three layers, the ectoderm, the endoderm, and the mesoderm, are organized in triploblastic organisms. So the first one is going to be the simplest. And this is going to be what's called the acoelomate. I know, what a word. So remember, A in front of a word means not, right? They don't have something. And in this case, they don't have what's called a coelom, coelom. So a coelom is a body cavity. You have lots of different body cavities. You have one that houses your brain. You have one that houses your spinal cord. You have a body cavity for your lungs, a separate one for your heart, a separate one for your abdominal organs. So these organisms are going to be really simple. They don't have separate body cavities to house their organs, so they're going to be very simple. So for the description on your chart, you can just write what this means. So acoelomate, no true body cavity, no coelom. We're going to draw a picture, an example here, if you want to write that down in your chart, is a flatworm, which is what we're looking at in this picture here, this diagram. If you sliced that worm in half, you'd be able to see where these different parts of their body originated from, these 3 different layers. So you're going to draw this for your picture. You can color code it if you want, but you're going to see they're pretty solid all the way through. You're not going to see like open spaces that house different organs that can work independently. They're super simple. So they're going to have an outer covering that's going to be from the ectoderm. So layer that what's blue in this picture, you're going to label in your diagram the ectoderm. And then if you look at what's yellow in this diagram, that's their digestive tract, right? There's kind of a tube with a hole in the middle. It's like their intestine where their food goes through. So the yellow part of this diagram, draw it on yours, and then label it endoderm. That part comes from endoderm, right? Inner layer. And then they have this mesoderm that just fills up all the space in between the two. So what's red in this picture, you can shade it in or color code it in your diagram and label that mesoderm. So blue is ectoderm, red is mesoderm, yellow is endoderm, right? Just in this diagram, not in real life. So include in your chart here an examples, flatworms, and then draw a picture and label it ectoderm, endoderm, and mesoderm. All right, the second type of body organization we'll see in these triploblastic organisms, right? The 3 layers of cells are called pseudocoelomate. Pseudo means fake or false. So they have a fake or a false body cavity or coelom. So they do have some sort of like open spaces in their body, but it's not the way that yours is organized. It's not as complicated as yours. So they're starting to see some open spaces. They're going to have some sort of like organs that maybe are a little bit differentiated, but they're still not as complicated as you. Our example is roundworms. And if you see, this is a roundworm here. If you sliced them in half, you could see where their different tissues originated from. So blue in this picture is going to be ectoderm, so label that ectoderm. Right, they still in the middle of their body have that digestive tract from endoderm, right, with the tube in the middle for their food. And then this is where it gets a little different, right? The red here is going to be mesoderm. It's going to be their muscles. We'll talk a lot about that later. And then they have this sort of open space. This is not to scale, so it's not going to be this huge space, called a pseudocoelom. So the space in between the endoderm, the yellow part, and the red part, the mesoderm, is called the pseudocoelom, a fake body cavity. All right. So we'll see that sort of organization with roundworms. And then the next one is going to be what we have. So this is the last one. It's the most complicated version of the triploblast body organization, and it's called a coelomate, right? Coelom is a body cavity. Sometimes you'll say this as eucoelomate. We're going to call them coelomates. So coelomate means they have a true body cavity. So I could probably like keep that so it matches the other slides. And this body cavity is completely separated by mesoderm. They have these pockets of spaces within their mesoderm. Those are considered to be true body cavities or coeloms. So some examples are us, earthworms, mollusks like octopuses, clams. Arthropods are going to be like insects, spiders. Chordates are anything that has a backbone like fish. So all sorts of different animals that we're going to look at much later in the semester have this most complicated body plan. So here's our example as an earthworm. If you slice it in half, you can see where those different tissues originated. So again, same kind of color coding as the other slides. Draw this on your table there. The outer layer is the ectoderm. The inner layer in gold is the endoderm, which is going to be their digestive system. And then you can see their mesoderm forms these pockets with these spaces in the middle. So there's these, it's a little more complicated, separate spaces to house separate organs. So these coelomates are going to be generally bigger in size. They're going to have a lot of different sort of body shapes, a lot more complicated than the other types. So we'll come back to these at the very end of the semester, kind of maybe halfway through. All right, so quick overview here, guys. You can see some other sort of diagrams if that helps. So we talked about acoelomates that don't have any of those extra spaces in their body, the coeloms. You can see the pseudocoelomates that have that supposedly fake or false body cavity in the middle there. And then here's a different example of what a coelomate might look like. But remember, all three of them have the ectoderm on the outside. It's color-coded in blue. The endoderm on the inside is color-coded yellow. And then the mesoderm in pink, the middle layer. All right, that's a lot. I know that's a lot. You don't have to have it memorized today because we're going to come back and talk about these throughout the semester. So thank you guys for hanging in there. Talk to you later.